Beloved soul. Heaven is asking you to prepare your heart for a truth that may feel heavy at first, because the energy surrounding your connection right now is filled with misunderstanding, emotional chaos, and painful accusations that have been allowed to grow in the dark, away from your presence, away from your voice, away from your ability to offer any form of truth or clarity. There are words being spoken about you behind closed doors. There are judgments being formed without the full picture being considered, without the full story being honored, without any real understanding of who you have become or what you have survived to arrive at this moment. And someone from your past, someone who still carries unresolved wounds, someone whose heart never truly healed from whatever happened between you, has reopened old injuries by painting you as something dark, dangerous, and emotionally destructive to anyone who dares to come close. Your person is angry, deeply angry, so angry that part of them feels disgust, betrayal, and emotional confusion all layered on top of one another in a way that is difficult for even them to untangle. Heaven sees the storm inside their heart right now with perfect clarity. They feel manipulated by what they heard. They feel shaken by the stories being placed so deliberately in front of them. They feel as though the ground beneath the connection they once felt with you has shifted unexpectedly, and now they are standing on unsteady earth, unsure of what is solid and what was always an illusion. And because their emotions are running so intensely, because fear has climbed into the front seat of their consciousness, they are struggling to separate what their spirit knows from what their wounded mind is now screaming at them. A man from your past has spoken about you with bitterness sitting heavily in his mouth and old resentment burning behind his eyes. He has called you a monster. He has claimed that you destroy emotional stability wherever you go, that chaos follows behind you like a shadow, that people who love you eventually find themselves scattered and broken in ways they never anticipated when they first opened their hearts. He has painted you as someone who pulls people deep into emotional turbulence, consumes the warmth from their spirits, leaves them hollowed out and disoriented, and then disappears before ever taking responsibility for the damage left behind in your wake. And your person listened, not because they fully wanted to believe it, not because everything inside them immediately agreed, but because fear always finds a way to grow louder when love is involved. Because the deeper the attachment, the more threatening the idea of having been wrong about someone becomes. And because the part of them that was already afraid of vulnerability, already quietly guarding against heartbreak, found in these accusations a familiar justification for retreat. Heaven says your person is standing in the middle of an enormous emotional conflict right now. One side of them holds tightly to what they personally experienced with you, the softness they felt, the connection that never quite made logical sense, the strange and undeniable pull toward your soul that made them feel more alive in certain moments than they had felt in years. They remember the comfort of your energy. They remember the way conversations with you felt different from conversations with anyone else. They remember moments of recognition that came from somewhere deeper than the surface. But the other side of them is now being slowly poisoned by doubt, by questions they cannot silence, by a narrative being fed to them by someone who still carries your name in his mouth like a wound that never properly closed. What if everything between us was fabricated? What if I was emotionally manipulated without ever realizing it? What if this person only ever brings destruction into the lives of those who trust them? What if the love I believed I felt was nothing more than illusion, projection, and longing dressed up as something real? These thoughts are haunting them now. They are cycling through their mind in the quiet hours. They are surfacing during moments of stillness when distraction is no longer available to keep them buried. And they are exhausting your person in ways that are becoming increasingly difficult to hide. And beloved, this is precisely why heaven is speaking directly to you today. Because you must not allow accusations born from someone else's unresolved pain to redefine who you truly are in this season of your life. You must not allow the bitterness of a wounded voice to become the lens through which you see yourself, or through which you allow others to see you. You are not the monster being described. But heaven says there is something important you must sit with honestly, something that requires courage rather than defensiveness to fully receive. Wounded souls sometimes unintentionally wound others while they are still in the process of trying to survive their own pain. There are people from your past who experienced your storms without ever understanding the deeper battles that were happening inside you at the time. They felt the rain without knowing about the drought that preceded it. They felt the fire without understanding what had been burning inside you long before they arrived. That does not make you evil. That makes you human. And there is an enormous, sacred difference between those two things. Heaven sees the parts of your life that others never took the time or patience to understand. Heaven was present for the nights you cried alone with no one to witness your grief. Heaven saw the emotional abandonment you survived, the love you reached for that was pulled away before you could fully hold it, the relationships that taught your nervous system that closeness always eventually leads to loss. Heaven saw how many times you poured yourself into loving someone while secretly living in quiet terror that they would eventually leave you the way others had left before them. Your emotional intensity did not come from cruelty. It came from unhealed wounds that never received the care they needed. It came from a heart that loved deeply but had never been shown a safe or stable model of what love was supposed to look like in practice. And yes, beloved, sometimes pain speaks through people before healing ever has the chance to. There were moments in your past when your fears took control of your reactions before wisdom could intervene. Moments when the emotions inside you overflowed in ways that frightened people who did not understand their origin. Moments when you clung too tightly because letting go felt identical to dying. Moments when you pushed too hard, became too reactive, said things from a place of panic rather than peace, or struggled in ways that were visible and difficult for those around you to hold. But heaven is saying this with great care. A wounded person who is still learning how to love without allowing fear to lead is not the same thing as a monster. These are not the same category of soul. And anyone who reduces your entire being into the sum of your most desperate moments has never truly reckoned with the complexity of their own darkness. The man from your past is speaking from his own scars now. He remembers the pain of whatever unfolded between you, but he does not carry the full story. He has edited the memory in the way that pain always edits memory, keeping the moments that justify his bitterness and releasing the context that would require him to extend you even the smallest measure of compassion. He remembers how overwhelmed he felt in your presence, but he has long since stopped asking himself what was happening inside you at the same time, what you were silently carrying, what invisible weight had already been pressing down on your spirit long before he entered your life. Hurt people almost always reduce others into villains because complexity requires a generosity of understanding that unresolved grief simply does not have the capacity to offer. And now your person is caught in the middle of that narrative, standing between his bitterness and their own lived experience of you, trying to decide which voice carries more truth. Heaven says your person's anger, as overwhelming as it feels right now, is partly fear wearing the mask of hatred. Because the truth that sits beneath the surface of all of it, the truth that their own soul already knows even as their mind argues against it, is that they care about you far more deeply than they want to admit in this moment. If they felt nothing, these words would not have affected them so violently. Accusations about strangers do not destabilize us. It is only accusations about people we have loved, people whose energy has entered our spirit and rearranged something inside us, that carry the power to shake our emotional foundation the way yours has been shaken. Your person became emotionally attached to you in ways they perhaps did not fully plan for or anticipate. Your energy entered their spirit at a level that went below the surface. Your connection touched places inside them they had kept carefully closed for a very long time. So now, hearing someone describe you as dangerous, as destructive, as someone to be feared rather than loved, has created a kind of internal earthquake that they do not yet know how to recover from. Part of them feels deeply betrayed, either by you, or by the version of you they believed in. Part of them feels strangely defensive of you, even while the anger is still burning. Part of them wants to reject everything they heard and return to what their own experience taught them about who you are. And part of them is quietly, painfully wondering whether love blinded them to something they should have seen clearly from the beginning. This internal war is consuming enormous amounts of their emotional energy. It is keeping them awake. It is coloring everything they see. And it is preventing them from arriving at any kind of peace, because the two sides of this conflict are equally strong and neither one is willing to yield. Heaven says your person is replaying memories now with a kind of desperate, forensic attention. They are moving through every conversation you shared, every emotional exchange, every moment of conflict and every moment of tenderness, searching for evidence that either confirms or dismantles the story being told about you. They are asking themselves whether the love between you was genuine or whether they constructed it from longing and projection and the deep human need to believe in something real. But the soul cannot fabricate recognition. The soul does not manufacture that particular feeling of coming home in the presence of another person out of nothing. And somewhere beneath all the noise of the accusations and the fear and the anger, your person knows that what they experienced with you was not nothing. They know the difference between something manufactured and something true. And that knowing is what confuses them most deeply, because it refuses to be silenced no matter how loudly everything else is speaking. Because monsters do not awaken souls. Monsters do not create the kind of spiritual recognition that lingers long after two people have separated, that surfaces unexpectedly in quiet moments, that makes a person stop in the middle of an ordinary afternoon and feel the absence of someone they told themselves they were finished with. Monsters do not leave behind warmth that persists through seasons of distance and doubt. Your person remembers the tenderness you carried in your eyes when you thought no one was paying attention. They remember the moments your voice softened in ways that were not calculated or performed. They remember the particular quality of safety they felt during certain vulnerable conversations, the way your energy held them in ways they had not experienced before and have not been able to fully replicate since. Those memories do not align with the accusations being delivered to them now. And that contradiction, that painful gap between what they were told and what they actually lived, is pulling their heart in two directions simultaneously. Beloved soul, heaven wants you to receive something difficult but profoundly important today. The version of yourself that exists right now and the version of yourself that existed during your darkest seasons are not the same being anymore. They share the same name, the same face, the same history, but they are not identical in spirit, in consciousness, or in the way they move through the world and through relationships. People will sometimes attempt to hold you hostage to who you were during your most broken seasons. They will define your entire character by your lowest moments rather than honoring the full arc of your becoming. They will remember your breakdowns more clearly than they remember your healing. They will speak your worst chapter aloud in rooms where your growth is never mentioned and your transformation is never acknowledged. But heaven measures souls according to a completely different standard than wounded human memory does. Heaven sees evolution. Heaven sees the quiet, unglamorous work of becoming. Heaven sees repentance not as performance but as the honest, daily practice of choosing differently than you once chose. Heaven sees self-awareness growing in places where there was once only reactive pain. Heaven sees the version of you that is working, slowly and sometimes painfully, to become softer, calmer, wiser, and more emotionally conscious than the person you were when you were still leading entirely from your wounds. You are genuinely not the same person who once reacted from pure survival mode, whose every emotional response was shaped by old fear rather than present truth. And yet your past still follows behind you like a shadow that refuses to dissolve, whispering outdated versions of your identity into rooms you have already emotionally outgrown, into the ears of people who never knew you in your evolution, only in your breakdown. This is why your spirit has been feeling so heavy lately, so exhausted in ways that rest does not seem to fully repair. Because part of you carries the quiet, grinding fear that no matter how much genuine healing you do, no matter how much inner work you commit to, no matter how significantly you grow, people will continue to see you only through the lens of your worst and most painful moments. That the version of you formed in the fire of your deepest suffering will always arrive in a room before the version of you that the fire eventually forged. But heaven is saying this clearly and without any softening: your mistakes are not your final identity. Your wounds are not your final identity. Your emotional chaos was not your permanent form. And no human being, no matter how deeply they were hurt, no matter how justified their pain, no matter how long they have carried the story of what happened between you, has the authority or the spiritual right to reduce your entire soul into one difficult chapter of a story that is still being written. Heaven is also asking you, with great gentleness, to remain humble enough to reflect honestly rather than retreating immediately into self-defense. If there are places inside you that still carry patterns rooted in fear, abandonment wounds, insecurity, or emotional overwhelm, do not run from that truth. Do not armor yourself against it with anger or justification. Allow it to be seen clearly, and then allow heaven to continue transforming those places slowly and with care. Because growth requires honesty with yourself. It does not require shame. Shame tells you that you are fundamentally broken, that you are the sum of every harm you ever caused, that you deserve nothing beyond the worst interpretation others have formed of you. Healing tells you something entirely different: that you were hurting, that you survived in the ways you knew how to survive, and that now you are being invited into a more conscious and more loving way of existing in the world. Those are not the same message, and it matters enormously which one you choose to listen to. Heaven says your soul is already moving toward healing, even in this difficult season. Even now, while the accusations are loud and the confusion is heavy and the storm around your connection feels relentless, something inside you is quietly, steadily transforming. As for your person, they are not in a place of emotional stability right now, and they will not arrive there quickly. The anger they are displaying is real, but it is only the most visible layer of something far more complex and far more tender beneath it. Underneath that anger is heartbreak. Underneath the heartbreak is confusion. Underneath the confusion is fear. And underneath the fear is an emotional attachment to you that they have not yet found a way to release, because some connections do not release simply because the mind decides they should. There will be moments they want to push you away with the full force of everything they are feeling. And there will be moments, quieter and more private, when they desperately want to hear that none of what they were told is the complete truth. That the person they felt something real with is still the person they believed in. That love did not deceive them entirely. That is why their energy feels so unsteady, so unpredictable, so difficult to read from where you are standing. They are not operating from a single, clear emotional position. They are caught between multiple truths and multiple fears, and none of them are resolving quickly. But beloved, souls remember truth even when minds become tangled in confusion, even when the noise is loudest, even when doubt is most persuasive. The soul holds onto what it genuinely experienced, and it does not surrender that knowing easily, no matter how hard the circumstances press. Heaven says to give space without disappearing into panic. Do not destroy yourself trying to perform your goodness for someone whose fear is too loud right now to hear clearly. Do not collapse yourself trying to dismantle an accusation that was never truly about you. It was always about the unhealed pain of the person who made it. Truth reveals itself. It always does. What is authentic survives examination. What is genuine withstands the weight of time and doubt and distance. What is false, eventually, collapses beneath the pressure of its own dishonesty. If what existed between you and your person was real, and heaven says something real was there, then that truth will find its way back to the surface, no matter how deeply confusion has temporarily buried it. But more than anything, heaven wants you to stop measuring your worth through the fear of rejection. You do not need to become a perfect, unblemished version of yourself to deserve love. You do not need to erase every difficult moment from your history to become worthy of connection, of kindness, of someone choosing you with full knowledge of who you are and where you have been. You only need the quiet, daily courage to keep healing honestly, to keep choosing growth over the comfort of staying exactly as you are, to keep allowing heaven access to the places that still need light. That is enough. It has always been enough. The version of you that heaven sees is not a monster. Heaven sees a soul who loved with overwhelming intensity because abandonment was the first language loss ever taught them. A soul who sometimes reacted from the deepest chambers of their fear because no one ever showed them another way when it mattered most. A soul still in the beautiful, difficult, sacred process of learning how to carry deep feeling without being consumed by it. A soul being slowly and faithfully transformed through every heartbreak, every painful lesson, every honest mirror that life has had the courage to place directly in front of them. So breathe, beloved. This storm is not your final story. Your person's anger is not the last word written about this connection. And your past is not the permanent ceiling of what your life is allowed to become. Heaven is still working quietly on both of your hearts. In the painful places. In the silent places. In the places neither of you has yet found the language to describe. And one day, when the fear has exhausted itself and the noise has finally stilled, the full truth of who you are and what this connection carried will stand in the open light, undiminished by gossip, unbent by wounded projection, and finally, mercifully, free from the distortions that human pain always places over what it cannot yet understand.